Hello guys and welcome to my very first YouTube video. My name is Kareem and on this channel we're going to be talking about books, music, movies, TV shows, and I thought that what better way to start this channel than to tell you about my top 10 books of the year. I think it'll give you an idea of my reading taste and what kind of books I'm mostly drawn to. So two things before we start. I read 56 books last year, so these are the best 10 books in my opinion. And second thing is I've ranked these books from 10 to 1, but don't take them too seriously, they're just for the purpose of this video. And now let's just start. So at number 10 we have Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Now this is a romance book and I don't usually read romance, but this book and the author Emily Henry in general is super popular in the book community, and I really wanted to check out her books, and I started with her most recent one, which is Book Lovers. So in this book we follow Nora, who is a book agent, and Charlie, who is a book editor. They know each other because they work in the same industry. They've had a previous interaction and it didn't really go well, so you know, they kind of hate each other. And then years later Nora goes on a trip with her sister to a small town, and of course she bumps into Charlie and you know, they fall in love, etc. I really loved the writing in this book. Emily Henry's writing is very accessible, very easy to read. I loved the characters, the two main characters, Nora and Charlie. I thought their chemistry felt real, it was not forced. I also loved the dynamic between Nora and her sister. And just overall I had so much fun reading this book, and as someone who, as I said, doesn't really read romance in general, this should tell you something. I can't wait to read her other books. At number 9 we have Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. It's hard to describe what it is about. Basically it is told through the point of view of our two main characters, Alice and Aileen. Alice has recently moved out of Dublin into a small town to, I think, work on her novel, and there she meets Felix and you know, they start kind of like a relationship. And in Dublin Aileen is in an on and off relationship or thing with one of her childhood friends, Simon. We go from Alice's POV to Aileen's POV, but what I really loved in this book was that in between those chapters we always had email exchanges between them. So basically they would update each other about, you know, their life, but they would also talk about social issues and political issues like climate change, capitalism, and about love and family and relationships. And I just found those emails so interesting because it was kind of like a brain dump. I noticed this is something that Sally Rooney kind of always does in her books. She uses her characters as kind of like vessels to express her own political views, which understandably can be a turn off to certain people. I actually really enjoy it because I'm interested in those topics in general, so it makes the book more interesting to me. This is not a very plot heavy book. We just follow these two characters as they, you know, figure out their relationship. But I know this is not a book that is that everybody agrees on. I personally liked it and I would recommend it. At number 8 we have The Bread the Devil Knead by Lisa Allen Agostini. This book is written in Trinidadian Creole. So at the beginning the reading experience was less smooth than normal, but I quickly got used to it and it actually becomes part of the charm of the book, in my opinion. In this book we follow our main character Alicia, who is a 40-year-old woman managing a boutique in Trinidad, and her partner is violent, so she's always trying to hide the marks from her colleagues, and at the same time she has an affair with her boss. One day she notices a woman getting shot at and killed by her partner, her husband, whatever. So this kind of like makes her question her life and think back to her childhood, and that's when we learn about what happened when she was young. And again, this is not a very plot heavy book, but I found her so captivating that I just couldn't put the book down. I finished it in 2 sittings. I just wanted to know what was going to happen to her. I was rooting for her. I wanted her to get out of this relationship. The book is a bit heavy at times. There are some descriptive and graphic scenes of her, you know, being sexually abused. So be mindful, I guess, before picking this book up, but it is so good. At number 7 we have Good Intentions by Qasim Ali. This book is one that I also finished super quickly because fell in love with it. I couldn't put it down. In this book we follow Noor, who is a Pakistani English boy. He has always been the perfect son, and at the beginning of the book he's about to tell his parents that he's been dating a black woman for years, and he knows his parents are not going to approve because, well, first of all, they're racist, and two, because they, want him to end up with a Pakistani girl. So this is the premise of the book, and it explores this struggle between, wanting to be your own self and also trying to please your parents at the same time, which, sometimes is just not possible because you don't want the same thing. I think this is a very universal feeling, a very universal life experience, so I think you can easily relate to this book. And yeah, I just loved how this was explored in the book, and I loved the ending. It's about also race and being an immigrant. Please read it, it's incredible. At number 6, we have yet another romance book. Can you believe this? And it's Red, White, Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Now, in this book we follow Alex, who is the son of the President of the United States, and Henry, who is a prince in the British monarchy. And we follow them as they go from being kind of like enemies to fake friends to, lovers. And this book is so funny. I had so much fun reading this book. The humor in this book was chef's kiss. The banter between the characters was very funny. It's very current with a lot of references to pop culture, and I just loved it. It was also very heartwarming, very cute. The romance was incredible again. There was also kind of like a political backdrop in this book, so Alex is helping his mom work on her re-election campaign, so there's this, but also the impact of this relationship on the relationship between the two countries. Again, not a romance fan, but this book, I had so much fun reading it. So yeah, Red, White, Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. The next one is part of a very long series, and it's Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare, which is book 1 in the Infernal Devices series, which is part of the Shadowhunters series. So I started this Shadowhunter series last year. I read them in order of publication, which means that I read the first books of the Mortal Instruments first, and then I read book 1 of the Infernal Devices. I went back to the Mortal Instruments. It's a long story, you don't have to know about it, but this one is easily my favorite. First of all, I loved the universe of the Shadowhunters because you have like magicians, you have people who hunt demons, you have werewolves, you have vampires. But what I didn't like in the Mortal Instruments was the two main characters. They were so boring and just, yeah, I just didn't really care about them. And this one, the 3 main characters are also likable. There's a love triangle between the 3 of them. I just really cared about those characters and I wanted the best for them. On top of that, this book is set in 1800s Victorian era England, and I don't know, this setting just made the universe 100 times better. And you also have like clockwork creatures. There's so much suspense in this book. There's always something happening, and I just loved every single thing about it. I finished the series last year as well, and this remains my favorite out of the 3 and out of the entire Shadowhunter books that I've read so far. At number 4, we have, I would say, the most controversial book on this list. And this book is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. How do I explain this? So we follow 4 college classmates as they graduate and then find love and start working, and basically we follow them through decades. Specifically, we follow one of the characters whose name is Jude, and Jude, at the beginning of the book you understand that he lived something horrible in his childhood, but you don't know what, and you slowly find out, and it's a lot. This book is so heavy, so traumatic. Like it's not a book that I would easily recommend because of just how much trauma this book dumps on you. This is the reason why some people despise it. Like, I don't know what else to say. This book destroyed me. I read it almost a year ago and I still think about it. I finished it when I was on a plane coming back to Paris, and I was crying. I was bawling. I've never cried for a book like I did for this one. The reason for that is because the writing by Hanya is so good, and because of how descriptive she is, she really fleshes out her characters that they almost feel like actual people that you're friends with. So when things happen to them. It's like it's happening to people you know, and it's so hard. I just love this book so much. I actually want to read it again, but this time I want to like annotate it. I don't know why I do this to myself, but I just loved it so much. And if you want to cry, this is it. And now we're entering the top 3 territory. At number 3 we have one of the last books that I read, and it's As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow. This book is set during the Syrian Revolution in 2011, and we follow our main character whose name is Salama. And Salama, you know, before the revolution starts, is a pharmacy student. You know, she's in her first year, and then the revolution starts, and her mom dies, you know, under the bombs. Her brother and her father are arrested, and she has no idea where they are. She doesn't even know if they're still alive. Her childhood best friend, who is married to her brother, is pregnant. On top of that, because the regime is bombing hospitals and killing doctors, she is kind of like promoted to being kind of like a surgeon, even though she's just in her first year. But she has to because no one else is able to perform those surgeries. On top of that, she meets a boy and she falls in love. So she is torn between leaving Syria, immigrating to Europe, risking her life on a boat so that she can have a better life, but also for her friend and the baby that's on the way, or staying in Syria with the boy that she's in love with and helping in the hospital as much as she can. Thousands of Syrian families have lived this exact same thing, and this book is so well written. First of all, like, this is her debut novel, but what a debut, to be honest. This book is so important, and I think I'm a bit biased because I'm Syrian and this story, you know, hits too close to home, but you fall in love with those characters, and it sucks to read that those things happened. It is very heavy, I have to say, because what happened during the revolution and the civil war was terrible, you know, so reading about it is not easy, but I think it's important. There's one point in this book where something happens and it just completely took me by surprise. I was shocked, and honestly it made me cry. Yeah, honestly one of the best books I've ever read, and I can't wait for this author to write more books. But please read it. At number 2 we have Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This author, I already loved her other book, which is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It is one of my favorite books of all time, and I thought, you know, she could never top it. But then I read this, and it's like, Evelyn Hugo, who? In this book we follow a fictional rock band in the late 60s, and it is told in an interview format. So we learn about the story of this band, how it formed, and the behind the scenes and the drama of a rock band at the time. What was also interesting about this book is that sometimes you would have one of the band members say something, and then on the next page another band member would say the exact opposite. So you also had to figure out like who was lying, you know, because depending on, I guess, the motives and agenda, they would remember a story differently. And I feel like this interview format worked perfectly for the story that was being told. They felt like an actual rock band, and as I love music and just like following artists and, you know, the life of a musician, this was perfect for me. There's a series coming out in March, so this is your time to read it before the show comes out. I can't wait to read it again and to just watch the show. And finally, my number 1 book of 2022 is The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali. Guys, I can't even begin to explain how much this book has touched me. Where do I start from? Like, first of all, look at the cover. So what is this book about? Basically, it is set in 1950s Tehran, and we follow Roya, who is a teenager at the time, and she always goes to this stationery shop, and one day she meets a boy there who is called Bahman, and then, you know, romance blooms and they fall in love and everything. And on the eve of their marriage, something happens. We don't know what. He just disappears and never shows up again. So this is the first timeline, and then there's a second timeline which is set like decades later, and we follow Roya again. She now lives in the United States. She has a husband and kids, and, you know, she's completely moved on, but by chance she meets up with Bahman again, and they talk, and she finally figures out and learns what happened and why he never showed up. And let me tell you, when you understand what actually happened, it just completely destroys you. Like, I cried so much reading this book when I found out what it is that happened, and like, I almost cried as much as I did reading A Little Life. So that should tell you something. The characters are so well written. I just love them both so much. And you know, again, this is why when you find out what actually happened to them, because you love them, you just, it completely destroys you. And I also really love the relationship between Roya and her sister. Like, I just love the banter between them and the dynamic. On top of that, there are a lot of references to Persian culture, which I found so similar sometimes to my own culture, which was so much fun to read about. Like the food, the family traditions and everything. A lot of it felt familiar to me. Obviously, this made me enjoy it even more. And finally, there's this political backdrop. It's during the Iranian Revolution. And again, I love politics, especially when it comes to that region of the world. Again, I'm biased, but it just made this book way more interesting because it added this political dimension to it. It's a love story, but it's also about so much more. It's about fighting for democracy. It's about, you know, generational trauma. So yeah, honestly, if you are to take one book out of this list, it's this one. Like, it's so good. So good. The Stationery Shop. One of the best books of all time. And that's it. These were my top 10 books of 2022. I really hope you got at least one book recommendation from this list. And if you did, and if you end up reading one of the books, please let me know what you think. I would love to discuss the book with you. Hope you enjoyed it. This was a bit hard for me to make because it's my first time and I'm not very comfortable yet, but you know, I have so many ideas for future videos and so many things that I want to do and talk about. So I hope you'll join me in this journey, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.